Hey everyone, welcome back to More Than You Asked For, a little bit of JavaScript and a whole lot of talking and other things with me, Kyle Shevlin. As each week, we're just gonna work through learning JavaScript together, and right now we're currently focused on like a beginner's React series. So I've called it React 101. We're trying to cover like all the little basics that you might need to know if you're writing React apps. And so, I'm glad y'all are back. Glad we're here another week. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna wait a little bit, see if some people start to show up in the chat rooms. So I'll go through some boilerplate stuff. Let's see. Um, yeah, I kind of had a big week in some ways. I had a Medium article that was pretty popular, and a tweet that just blew up, and that's crazy. I'll probably share a bit about it on the stream tonight. And I've been getting to work on a few little projects here and there. Hello, Jen. First one to the stream tonight, I think. So glad you're there. I see you in the chat. Um, yeah, I hope everything's sounding good and looking good on the camera and stuff. So, um, yeah. Portland weather has decided that we're going to skip fall and go straight to winter. I don't know if that's how it's working out where you are. I know you could potentially be anywhere in the world, northern and southern hemisphere or whatnot. And so, I don't know. Hope you're warm enough. I had to have the space heater on for a while to get this room warm enough, and got myself some beer. It'll warm me up, right? So, um, last week we covered Redux, right? We blazed through it to some degree. And someone rightfully pointed out to me that maybe Redux is not a React 101 lesson, but it was a pretty natural refactor for us, given that we're moving from app state to like a global state. So we had like component state before, and it made sense to take some of this data and move it to a more global place, and that's what Redux is. And so I thought it was a pretty natural refactor for us to do, and I'm glad we did it. But I think I might take a little bit of time just to make sure I walk through each step once again, just really quick, to make sure that everyone who watched last week is able to kind of see it again and make sure that it makes sense to them. Anyways, so yeah, I thought we might do that. And then looking at the code, some people made some suggestions on Twitter and otherwise in other places that we could do to maybe cover tonight. And if we run out of like little things to do here and there, I was thinking maybe we would get into higher order components tonight. It's a pretty fun topic to me. It's one of my favorite patterns in React, even though it's kind of falling out of fashion. It just speaks to me because it follows some functional programming techniques, and I've been trying to learn that a little bit. So let's start to get into it. I might have to cover this a couple times tonight, just because it seems that people peak on watching me about like 9 p.m., right? 9 p.m. Pacific. And I think it has to do with how Twitter works and how people finally find the tweet. So, all right. So last week, we took a couple components. We have, beforehand, we just had a GitHub profile component. And it takes some data and it spits out a profile, or in this case, if there's no data, it's just going to return null, so it's not going to render. And then you see in here, it has a GitHub repos container. Oh, I should probably tell you, I did a bit of refactor over the weekend while I was trying to get this up to date and get the repo pushed up to GitHub with with the commit so y'all could follow the changes. And this was a big change, but I ended up doing a bit of a refactor, and so I might back up and try and walk you all through that refactor since it didn't get to happen on the air. Other things I did while I wasn't on the air was you might notice these test files are at least a little more filled right now. Our reducers handle all their cases, and we actually have some tests for components, and they're not extensive, but and then you'll see some snapshots that we can talk about at some point. But yeah, that's what we'll cover tonight. We'll just get into it, and how was your week? How was your week? Let me know in the chat. I'd love to find out. I honestly kind of had a very roller coaster week. I had some of the highest highs I've had in a while, and I've had some pretty big lows this week. So I'm trying to keep my spirits up. I'm the kind of person that the lows can get me pretty good, and I think we've all been there. So I try not to beat myself up too much. I don't think it's very unique to struggle to deal with challenging things in life. I think it's a very common thing, even if we don't talk about it as being a common event. But it does happen. We're humans. I don't mean to be a little too philosophical here, but sometimes I think we really think about humans and their greatest strength or their biggest capacity being their ability to think rationally and logically, greater than all the other animals in the animal kingdom. And sure, this is true. I mean, the fact that I can stream to you via this device that travels via the Wi-Fi to the router and out to a network and reaches all of you, that's a magnificent achievement, and we honestly should be grateful and in somewhat of awe that it exists. But I actually kind of started to believe in the last few years that maybe what's the most interesting thing about humans, or the thing that gives them the greatest thing over the animals, is actually our emotional capacity. I believe humans are the most emotional animals. And I don't believe this emotion to be necessarily a weakness. I believe this to be our way of bonding with each other. The depth and complexity for which we feel all things is pretty amazing. And I think that's what binds us, and that's something that we shouldn't shun, and we should be proud of. It's who we are. And so if you're out there, and I see a few of you just tuned in, you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about. I'm just saying, when you have a rough week, it's okay. You're literally in common ground with your entire species. Pretty sure most of us have bad weeks. So I encourage you to find trusted people to talk to about it. If it's particularly bad, please seek help, that kind of stuff. And just know I'm always here to encourage you and spur you on Twitter. So remember, you can send me a DM. I can't fix everything, but I will be the helpful person I can be. And so, yeah. All right, philosophical rant over. Let's get back to some code. Hey, Swill, or Swe LTV. Noticing the capitalization. Not sure how you pronounce that, but good to see you. So why don't I recap what we did last week and walk you through the refactor I did. So last week I We updated our application from using component state to using a Redux. Redux is a very popular state management library in the React ecosystem. Um, there are some other alternatives. Probably the most notable one, excuse me, probably the most notable one is MobX. And I'm not terribly familiar with it. I haven't really used it. I don't want to call me Louis. All right, I will. Nice to see you, Louis. Or Lewis. Is it Lewis or Louis? I never know if I'm supposed to. I'll go with Lewis. You're probably an adult. I'll go with Lewis. Um, uh, Okay, sorry. I get interrupted. There's like, in a great way. I'm not upset about it at all. Like, this is awesome. I just think there's a bit of a delay between like what I say and by the time y'all are chatting about it. So if it ever feels like weird that I'm like mid sentence and all of a sudden I see, oh, I had it right. All right, see, like it just happened again. He's telling me that I had the correct pronunciation. So that's it's great to know. If you ever wonder why there's like this weird like gap between what I'm responding to, it's that the chat comes in probably about a minute, maybe 2 minutes after I say something. It feels like that, so that's why I jump around a little bit. I'm not sure what you're responding to, Jen. Tazbar's chat did not come into my chat here. So, Tazbar, I know you said something to me today. I talked to a lot of people, so please forgive me. I'll look it up later to make sure I remember precisely who you are. But, I hope you're doing all right. Not sure what was scary. I'm going to guess an interview, maybe. Just based on the context. That's my guess. Anyways, all right, Redux. Okay, so let's cover the pattern of how Redux works. Right, Redux has a store. Like we made that store here. Redux has a couple useful method functions that it exports for us, namely the create store, which is the most important one. We're also using the apply middleware so that get so we can use our thunks later. And then we're importing thunks. I showed you guys the awesome DevTools extension. It's really great. Go check it out on GitHub. I'll even try and pull it up right now. Redux DevTools extension. Yeah, this guy. You'll want to pick up the extension from the Chrome store, but this is just great. I mean, it does even more than I showed you. It's like for everything. Ooh, this could have been good. I did build a React app in Electron once, and I did not have this, so I just built the whole thing in the browser and then stuffed it in Electron at the last minute. But yeah, it walks you through all the tips and tricks of that, so that's a great thing. But we have our store, and then we need to get our store into our app. And so at the app level, we pull the React Redux project. If you will find that one too, React Redux. This is just like official React bindings for Redux. And it just it kind of shows you, this is really all it provides. It provides the provider, which is a component, and it provides the higher order component connect so that it connects to the store that's given by the provider. So this package is kind of important too. But we pass the store that we made in the other file as the store in the provider. And then throughout our application, we're going to use connect to take a component and connect it to the store. So the next place we went was the GitHub profile container, and you'll remember that from last week. And I did some refactoring, and I moved some of the code from components into a containers folder. So in one aspect, these are all components. Like, it's really important to not lose sight of that. Like Components are just separations and encapsulation of like logic, right? But it is definitely useful, especially as your project grows and you you maybe are working on a team to develop some kind of organizational structure. And I kind of like the one I have here, and it's just gonna keep getting a little bit bigger as we add things and stuff. But like I split it out into containers, and often like maybe next week we'll get into React Router, and I'll make a folder called Pages, and generally that will have a component that's closer to being at a page level than typical but anyways, like we split out our GitHub profile into a container. I did modify this a bit while over the weekend when I made the commit. As always, I haven't shared this yet with you, but if you haven't been there yet and you want to check out the repository, or you just want to give it a star, like I'm shameless. I will take stars. They make me feel like a little warm and fuzzy inside, like something I'm doing is somewhat meaningful into the world. I don't know. I'm just saying. Uh, anyways, this is the repo, and maybe we can actually even probably look at the last commit. Like here, refactor and update tests for components. You can see what I did over the weekend. Lots of tests, some snapshots, a little bit of oh yeah, and I did a big refactor here. Y'all might remember my very crazy fetch user profile that had nested Axios calls and thens and stuff. I think we'll refactor that today, but I moved it from GitHub container to GitHub profile container because it was more specific. I wanted this file is getting just the profile. And then I added a repos container. I split those two actions out so it was a bit cleaner that you can get a profile and then you can get repos, and so that one network call can succeed or fail, and the other one doesn't necessarily get called yet. And when the repos one gets called, it has a separate success and fail. And so I did a little bit of that refactor there. I'm really confused by this. Beardy Man doesn't use doc type HTML for the second week in a row. If anyone can tell me what I'm missing, because in my template I do have doc type HTML. So I don't know. Maybe this is some weird troll tactic on Twitch. I don't know. Y'all can help me out. Help me out. I hate being confused. It sucks. Going back. So I split it out. There's a GitHub repos container, and what all the repos container does is, if I can find it, we just moved the repos into its own file, and then the container just pulls out the this one will so that's the profile one. Where's the repos one? I'm blind, I think. There it is. So this time we'll get the user from state. I'm sorry, this is really confusing. We'll get the user down here with map state to props, and we split it out. Let's look at it in the actual code base. Definitely a Russian bot from Twitter. Cool. Good to know. I'm going to catch up real quick. Tazbar, had my first junior JS interview this week. Totally bombed it. Yes. Okay. JavaScript interviews, man. They can be really they can be a bitch. They can be challenging. They can be difficult, right? And I actually gave a talk earlier this year on how to improve at JavaScript interviews. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded. The slides still exist, but I'm going to be honest, the slides aren't going to be that helpful because the way I tend to write slides and speak is slides just end up being a prompt for me. You're all going to see my email now on stream, and hopefully can't figure out my password. Um, this one. See if I can't just click at it and pull it up. So I don't think my slides will be all that helpful to you per se. They might be. They mostly are prompts for me on what to talk about. But if you want to check it out, it's slides.com/Kyle Shevlin/improving at JS interviews. That's improving at JS interviews. So I don't know if this will help. I hope it does. But I know they can be really challenging, and there's a couple reasons why. Like, yes, people are looking for qualified like devs, but here's the thing: a lot of people don't actually get to spend much time training to be good at interviewing. Not like giving interviews. I'm sorry. Honestly, like I've only given a handful of interviews thus far in my career, and so I'm still improving at it, and I think it can be really challenging even as the interviewer to figure out like what are the right ways to gauge a person or present problems, or what's even the right material to to qualify people, right? So I want you to keep that in mind. As my good friend Brian Holt says, interviewing is bullshit. So, and he's not wrong. I mean, he's saying it to be a bit hyperbolic, but he's totally right. Like, maybe the interviewer is having a crap day and says no. Maybe you have a crap day and they say no. You know, anything could happen. Maybe you get an interview. You're interviewing for JavaScript, but the person they scheduled does Ruby. I've seen it happen. It can be really challenging. So I'm sorry that you didn't do well. I think the best thing you can do is like give yourself that little bit of time to grieve it, like to just process it. But the best thing you can do is just hop back on and try it again. If it was a company you really really loved, please make sure to reach out and just respond back. Be polite and professional. You don't want to burn any bridges. You never know. Maybe a year or more down the line, maybe something comes up. You give it a second try and you get in. I was just talking to a couple friends today about like interviewing at Google, and how like half the employees failed at least one time interviewing there. So I think making a good impression goes further than just your skills. It goes to who you are and how you treat people. So, like I said, I'm sorry that happened, but it's no reason to get down. Keep working at it. It'll get better. In fact, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I kind of thought I might chat quite a bit tonight, and I'll let me give you a little insight into who I am. So on Saturday will mark my 4 years as a professional web developer, as a professional software engineer. I got my first job in 2013, and I'm really excited. I mean, I've been doing this for, like I said, just 4 years, and I feel amazing in the sense of like what I've learned, what I'm starting to accomplish. I feel even greater with the friends that I've started to make and the relationships I'm building, because before this, like as I've mentioned before, my profession was as a pastor. I worked in churches for like 10 years, and it was great in some ways, but really really challenging in others. And when I started to teach myself how to code about 5 years ago, I never dreamed it would change my life this much. And so what I'm trying to say is I know precisely what it's like to start with no skill or understanding of programming whatsoever, and the challenges and difficulties that come with teaching yourself or learning, and the challenges of trying to find that first job and trying to get started, right? But I also know the incredible joys of of accomplishing something cool, of radically changing your life, of opening opportunities you wouldn't otherwise have. So I say that not to brag that things worked out for me and maybe not for other people. I say that to be like, I can empathize with you, and I hope you take courage that someone has done it. You can do it too. And this is why, like, I try and give back and try and be helpful. So thanks for listening a little bit. I'll probably write a blog post about kind of my feelings about those 4 years later this week. But I just really wanted to share that with y'all. And, feel free to share your experiences in the chat, because I love seeing them and hearing them. So, all right. Russian bots aside, my past history aside, we were at the container components. These container components, I split it up into two. We used to have just a GitHub container, which did a couple things. Container components, what do? They get data, they massage data. So in this case, I'm fetching the user profile. We made that in an action. I'll show you that in a minute. If it's loading, show the spinner. Otherwise, if we have an error, show the error. Otherwise, show the profile with the user passed in. Okay, so let's follow that chain. We get to the profile. Profile gets data. If the data exists, show this. And then, we got another container here. This is a great pattern in React that we can nest container components. They don't have to be at the top of our component tree, right? Like other frameworks, I won't mention the one that I work in and day out. Like the way it was built, the typical way of getting data and fetching data is only at the top route layer. You can do this, but because of the patterns that the router gives you, it's not as common, right? And you end up with I think you end up with some anti-patterns to some degree. Like if what you're trying to do is just gather all your data at first and then display all your components. I think there's definitely components in your app that don't require any data. Like they just display stuff like the header maybe, or the footer, or your sidebar. I don't know, like stuff like that, right? So I think this is great. Like we have our container, fetches our data, displays something. When we display something, guess what? We can. It's like Matryoshka dolls of containers and data fetching. So in this case, the GitHub repos container gets mounted, and we come down here to the container. And when this gets mounted, I added a little check. If the user is there and the repo's length is 0, when the user repo is 0, we know we don't have any repos, we're gonna go fetch it. So and then we follow the same thing here. If it's loading, show the spinner down below. That shows you something we can reuse, or a loading spinner. If we have a message, show an error message, show that. Otherwise, pass the repos down, and then GitHub profile repos. We get repos from the state and we display them. And if no repos are found, we're there. I didn't mess around with this one as much because it's totally possible to end up with no repos at the end of it. And there might be some other optimizations to make. But for the most part, I felt like this was a pretty good refactor on the quick to split these up, but be able to get our data efficiently. Tazbar asks, why did I start with a ternary here? So the reason I did this is partly because my linter, the Airbnb linter, is demanding that there are default props, and it is possible that maybe a null object gets passed or an empty object. You can choose your own level of security in your application. In my case, you're probably right. Like in theory, this profile should never get rendered without the user data, right? Like that was the whole point of the container. But I guess maybe the quickest way is I can just show you. So working back around our Redux stuff, in our reducers, I have user set to null here. But if I comment this out and I save it and I come back here, we should get some errors. So the linter's like prop type user network, but has no corresponding default prop. Okay, well, if I say user is required, it's going to fail because user is actually null when it fetches it in map state to props. So the required statement is going, I thought it would. Let's give it a try. One thing I learned a lot in my career, and hopefully all you guys and gals can learn in your careers. Sometimes you try something and it fails, and you go back a week later and it's weird. You try the same thing and it works. There's probably just some missing detail. There's something sometimes you just overlook something. Like literally this week at work, I had an issue where a component was expanding beyond the grid boundaries of our layout, and I thought it might be a word break issue, and I tried word break word, and it didn't fix it. And I thought I tried it on the right element, and I know CSS pretty well. That is something I'm pretty darn strong in, and so I was like, okay, it must already be breaking, and there just must be something else. And I started diving down this rabbit hole of thinking it was a weird flexbox issue, even to the point where I'm like, our whole grid system is fucked. Pardon me if that gives us our explicit rating here on Twitter, but I thought I dove deep. I was like, if I turn off all these flex properties, look at it, it works. It's just magic. And come to find out, just adding word break word, the very thing I tried before, worked. I don't know what happened. I still to this day don't know what happened, but that's just part of working in this industry. It happens. Like, you will make choices, you will try things, you'll think they fail or they succeed, and you try them later and you're just wrong. And I think the best thing you can do in those situations is just very quickly, just be like, I messed up, I'm wrong, I tried this. I must have done something. I must have missed something. I don't know. Maybe that's not the most gamesmanship worthy thing to do in a business. I don't know. I'm not a very political person in that sense. I don't know how to play those kinds of games. I'm not trying to save face in front of my coworkers. Really, I'm just trying to be me and make some good shit. So, but okay. So maybe I'm wrong here. We will require the user. User error is not required. We'll give this another one too. Even though that is also null, just so you know. So they're both null. It said it compiled successfully. We'll go over here. We'll restart it. Okay, so there's other oh, see, and here's our new errors, right? So this is why I chose to do it that way. The failed prop type, the prop user is marked as required, but its value is null. So even though we passed the linter, right, we're not actually getting past the prop type checker, because null would indicate that it's not there, it's nothing. So how can you require nothing? You would really need, in these cases, instead of prop type shape, you need a union. It could be either null or it could be this, and the same thing here. So the way I handled that was not requiring these, giving these default props that matched what they were in the reducer to satisfy my linter, and yeah, so in that case, I don't know. I don't think there's ever a case that this could happen, but in the crazy chance that something happens where is loading is false, I don't have an error, and I haven't fetched the user yet, my user is null, the easiest way to handle this is just be like, this is the user is the data here, right? I could change this. We could call this all, every instance of data here could be user. We get here, if we don't have the user, don't show anything. It's the easiest way to handle that for me. So there's a really great question, Tazbar. I'm glad we were able to walk through it. Radari, nice to see you again. Glad everyone's checking out the stream. It's a lot of fun for me, and I really appreciate everyone hanging out. Okay, so we kind of touched on it. So we've got our container components. They connect to the store. How do we change our store? Like, what is our store, right? Well, our store is just a giant, well, it doesn't have to be giant. It could be as small as you make it, but it's a JavaScript object, right? Held in global state. Not globally accessible in that sense, but it's a global state for our application. Noob questions are totally welcome here. Ask away. I'll do my best. Sorry, Radari's asking in the chat. Are noob questions welcome? Of course they're welcome here. Anyways, and Jen, Knitcode Monkey, is also totally right. Like, you know, weird bugs happen all the time. Something could render faster or slower than you expected. Just better to be safe. In fact, as you get into your careers, you'll probably realize, like, there's so much money wrapped up in being safe. So safety is a good thing to do when you're building an application. I don't mean don't take chances. I just mean, like, weigh your risks, right? Like, and chances belong in a certain thing. Like, if you're building a proof of concept or a prototype, take all the chances you want. If this is in prod, you know, be really really cautious, I guess, to some degree. Okay, how do we update that store? I feel like this is not React 101 material. That's why I have to cover it again, right? So the way we update the store, right, is we create these actions. And actions are just plain JavaScript objects. You can see each one of these is just plain JavaScript object. And they have a type and they have a payload. Like, not a payload in the Flux sense, if you ever look up Flux for state management, but a payload as in we might supply some extra key value pairs on this object. You don't have to, but you might. And then we get into some fancier stuff where we actually compose and combine these things. So we're composing a few of our action creators here. But these action creators return an object. What's listening to that object? What gives it back that object? Well, the reducer is what listens to those objects. And in a complicated app, you might have multiple reducers. You would have, like, I don't know, my users reducer, my, let's say we were building Twitch, right? Like, you might have a users reducer. You might have a videos reducer. You might have, a chat reducer, and I can't think of other things, a subscription, and like all these things. You'd have different reducers, and you can use combine reducers to make them a more efficient organization. So maybe at some point we'll handle that. We could even do that tonight. That would probably be a good fun little refactor. But our reducer is a function that takes a state object. If there's no state supplied, it takes the initial object that we have up here, the initial state, and it takes that action, that object that we said must have a type. And those types get matched against cases, and when a case matches, we return, or we maybe manipulate some data. You know, you could be like, if you got the payload, in this case, action.username, maybe... I don't know, we could do something crazy like username equals action.username to uppercase. And then, we could add it to our state. And, maybe this was just something we did. I definitely have had reducers where I've had to do a pretty crazy amount of logic inside the reducer. Oftentimes, if it gets too messy, I will just split it out into its own reducer and combine them in. But like, that's what we're doing. Each case, each type we get, we handle, and we define how we're going to update the state. And we talked a little bit about updating it immutably. as opposed to with mutations. So if you notice, each one of these returns a new object, and we want to do that with Redux. That is the right pattern. We want to return a new object. We do not want to mutate state. A mutation would be like state.user_error equals null. We're changing it in place. It's much better, and it's the way Redux was intended to be written, to return a whole new object. Copy the state that you have now, and merge in the changes, returning a new object. If you don't like this object spread syntax that I'm using, you can also do object.assign. And we can start with an empty object that'll guarantee you're always bringing a new plain JavaScript object as the state, and then you merge in the state, and then we could merge in waiting for user true and all those things. So we're always returning brand new objects. That's how Redux is intended to be used. And then if we don't recognize the state, we just want to return whatever the state is. In fact, I have a test for this. If we go to reducers index test, I actually, as silly as it sounds, I throw this in all my reducer tests right here. It returns state when action is unaccounted for. So I can't imagine having this named action in my application ever. Maybe I could someday, but we just take the reducer and we pass a state and our action, and we expect it to still equal state when we don't have a case for that action type. So, and that's how this works, right? Like, we've connected our components. They're all listening to the store, right? And then within our components, we can map our actions to props, or we can map our state to props. And so when an event fires off, we can fire an action, and that action gets passed to the reducer, and that reducer figures out how to handle it and returns our new state. We have our new state, and all the components subscribe to that state. Update. And well, update assuming something has changed, right? Like, we could get into pure component and should component update, but that's the circle of Redux in React, right? Like, we have the state, it renders our UI, and we give certain things to our UI. Our UI has like listeners and state, and we fire something off. That fires an action. That action gets put into the reducer function call. It's called, and we get a new state. And those things in our UI that changes, they render. That is the circle of React, the circle of lifecycle. That's actually kind of a... If I had hit on that like 3 years ago, the circle of lifecycle, like, come on, that would have been a conference talk right there. You know it. When the stream catches up and you see that, I think chats are gonna come, because that was a good pun. I'm gonna quickly go back and take a look at Redari's. I just downloaded. I feel like it should be much simpler to live pre. So Redari, I'm gonna guess. I don't know if you're learning to code for the first time, but it sounds to me a bit like what you want is like an IDE. So maybe you're coming from, excuse me, I'm about to yawn. Maybe you're coming from a different software background than the web. I could be wrong. You did say noob, so I don't know if you mean like web development noob or noob. But anyways, what I'm trying to get at is what's great, I think, about web development and in the browser is the fact that it runs in the browser. So I know Nick Code Monkey did a good job of explaining what you can do. One of the things I love about the web, I'm going to pull up a blank page, and one of the things I love so much is that, like, it is this place where you can experiment without needing like an IDE. Like, and by that it's what is that, integrated development environment? Like, you used to need, like, you still do if you do certain languages and stuff. You need all these libraries and stuff running. Oh my gosh! Wow, that was a big yawn. I gotta laugh at myself over that one. That was big. Um, these integrated environments. You have one to some degree here. Like, if we want to practice some JavaScript, for instance, like maybe I was teaching you guys some. Uh, this isn't really dev mode so much as it's turning on the dev tools. I can do that here. Developer tools. You might also see that it's Command Alt I on the Mac, and Command Alt J if I just want the JavaScript console, which is what I was looking at now. Command I will open it up to whatever tab I had left. This is not a dev mode in the sense I just pulled up the about blank page. It could be I've changed the color. Yes, you can do that here if you didn't know. So nothing crazy. I just use dark themes because when you're staring at these all day, it's a little less harsh on the eyes. In fact, even just this right now at night is a bit harsh. But like we can do stuff here. Like let's do this. Body dot, and then we can add div equals document dot create element. See if I can remember how to do this. Div body dot append div, and we might see it. Oh, it's there. I think I can do like set attribute ID to foo. Is that right? Oh yeah. Okay. So, and then I can do like div data. I can make a new one. I can do all sorts of things. In fact, that's actually kind of how to React works. It calls all these create elements like down the page and inserts them. Like I could do like div dot inner HTML. I don't know if this will work. We'll give it a try. H1 more than you asked for. Close that H1. No. Hold. Oh no, I know what it is. Div dot inner. It's not a function. You set it equal to it. More than you. I can't type. Asked for. I also talk as I type, like not just on stream. Like sometimes, if no one's around, I just plain do it. Look at that. See, boom. Like we can build a web page right from here. Now, I'm not saying this is the best way to build a web application, like your web application as you're learning, but like we have this environment that like we don't need no stinking IDEs. We can build stuff on our own. Like once we learn a little bit of the API and that kind of thing. So, I think like this is a great place to maybe learn some JavaScript and that kind of thing right here, because you can evaluate things. You can be like, okay, maybe today I'm learning about arrays, and looks like I've already. So, what does the map method do? Well, the map takes a callback that it gives you that value. Let me give it a more meaningful name. The item in the array, and we could do something with that item. Well, why don't we their numbers? It's like item in the array times 2, and it'll return it. And like we can learn JavaScript right in the console right here. So I think this is one of the great things about the web. It's so easy and accessible. It's possibly the most democratic thing you can learn, as long as you can get a browser up and running. So, all right. I'm sorry I keep digressing. I'm digressing because I love your questions and I love teaching and I want to help. So, I know some of y'all know all this. I hope maybe just my soothing voice is enough to please y'all. All right. Let's get back to this. So we've talked about the circle of the life cycle and all that. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you specifically what I split out, actions index, if you remember last week, this right here actually had kind of nested calls. In fact, this isn't necessary anymore to return this data here, because this is a remnant of when I was using this data to then take a then, and the data was here, and I was doing another fetch based on the repos URL I got. So this right here isn't necessary. And I think I just want to double check that it works. We'll reload the web page, and it works just fine. What I thought we might do is a really quick refactor with async and await. Async await is another way to handle asynchronous code in JavaScript. It's new. I don't know the specific browser requirements. Can I use async await? Maybe it'll tell us. Come on. Look at all that green. Okay, so you can use async await in a lot of browsers. In IE, Firefox, in Chrome, you have to go all the way back to 49 to get it to fail. You can use it. Awesome, that's great. So this has become a pretty popular way of writing asynchronous code. And some people really hate all the thens and the catches and that kind of thing, and they prefer to write what looks like synchronous code but is actually asynchronous. And if you need to understand what those are, basically what it means is like synchronous code is code that happens in order and also is blocking, right? Like in JavaScript we have a single thread, meaning like when something is blocking that thread, other things don't happen. There's no other place for them to really happen. And so like if imagine having to do Ajax requests that were blocking, like if it was like get sync I don't know, just pick a website, and like imagine this, like if this one took like 20 seconds and this one took 30 seconds, I know that's ridiculous, but like there's people on bad connections all around the world. They might have to wait quite a bit of time for your big ass web page or your data set or something, like, and 5 seconds. Like if these were synchronous, they'd all block each other, meaning like if one of them fails, we might not even get to the other one. But my point being, like, between synchronicity, we opposed to synchronous calls, we have async, which is the idea of like we let something happen and we say, hey, we want to do this, and what we do is we actually give it like a callback to call when it's done doing it, and it puts it into a queue, and it runs those when it has an opportunity to run them, and when we get the result, the callback gets fired, put on the stack, and it's given to us. I posted a link to a pretty awesome video today that kind of explains all this in 1,000 times better than I can. I'm going to Twitter on the stream, but I'm doing it so I can get this link for y'all. That is not what I clicked. I clicked that. Don't crap out. No one needs to see all this. What is going on? Man, maybe this isn't going to work. Come on. There we go. It was a tweet and reply. Where is it? I talked a lot on Twitter today, so this one. Go find you this tweet. Yeah. Philip Roberts, what the heck is the event loop anyway? Go watch that if you need to figure it out. I learned some things from it. I think you can too. Philip Roberts, what is the event loop? Look it up when you're done watching me. No, just kidding. If you want to leave and go watch it, I won't be offended. But the point is, with asynchronicity, like, we're not blocking things, and we're going to get things at some undetermined time later. And so another way to write that, like, promises work that way. Like, a promise is a guaranteed resolution. Async await works with promises, but gives you a different syntax. And so, like if we have something like this, we know we're handling this asynchronously. What we can do is we define this function as async, and then we have access to the await word within the body of that function call. And so what we're going to do is, this is a synchronous call. Well, kind of a synchronous call. We don't really need to wait for this one. This one will just fire and update. This is the one we need to wait for. This is the asynchronous one. So what I will do is I'll actually, I'm going to do a couple things. First off, we're not going to use dot catch. We're going to use a try catch. So we're going to try something. If it works, we're going to do that. And if it fails, we're going to get an error and we're going to do something with that, right? So what we will do is we are going to move this line into our try, and we're going to give it a value. We're going to call it response equals axios.get that URL. Okay, so what happens is Axios is going to go make its fetch, and when we get the data, it's going to wait for it because we're going to add a wait, and we're going to block this from continuing evaluation until we get our response. And when we get our response, I'm going to store it in this variable, which means then I can take this line of code here, this dispatch, and I can dispatch with that response. So our code becomes that. Let me get rid of that white space. I hate that stuff. That's why I have the highlighter for it. And so we don't have that. And then we have an error. Like if an error were to occur, we want to handle that as well. And so when that happens, we're going to dispatch it with the profile. So we've basically moved our logic from being a bunch of chained thens to reading perhaps a bit more like synchronous code, but with the async and await words. We are using promises without using maybe the promise syntax. I'm not sure a better way to describe that. There are some nuances involved, but some people really like this better. There's definitely times where it makes code a lot cleaner, but there are some gotchas with it that maybe we'll cover some week. And so we can do the same thing down here with the fetch user repos, because this is also an async call. So we'll make the function asynchronous. We'll make our try catch, and I'll just write it out like this. I kind of like doing that sometimes. We know with our error we can just do that, and that's gone. And then here what we're going to do is our URL is getting passed in up here, so we'll take the response. My cat is trying to tear the carpet over there. I don't know if you can hear her. She's not happy. Her my wife is out for the evening, so we're gonna. How many of y'all have pets? Give me some pet emojis in the chat if you got pets. That could be fun. I do love my cats. They're a lot of fun. I cannot wait to get a dog someday, though. Our apartment complex won't let us have a dog, and I want a pupper so bad, so bad. Anyways, getting back to this, we're awaiting the response. We get the response. I'd also like to then pop off the repos off of that. And then I just want to map to their full name. And then we will dispatch that. And then we can get rid of this. And so here we go. We have our small little refactor here. It's not much of one, but this might be a little more legible to some of you and to your team. Like, that's a big deal. Like, you want to write code that makes sense to the people you work with. That can be really challenging. Sorry, I got paused up. I'm gonna keep going on what I was saying. Like, deciding things on a team can be a very challenging exercise, and it can be really frustrating. And it's honestly one of the hardest parts of the job. As you get better with your skill, like, the coding isn't the thing that becomes challenging or even most aggravating. Sure, it's tough, but you learn how to adapt and handle it. Like we've all been there where we spent 4 hours on like a bug that should have taken us 5 minutes, or we're grinding on something to get done at a deadline. But people will never cease to be challenging unless you're particularly gifted with that. But especially on a team, teams are they're a different beast, right? Like, and my suggestions, I don't know that I have any great advice, but like when you're coming up with how to write your code, like I kind of have a couple things that I try and keep in mind. I try to write code as clean as possible, not just for me and my OCD, but me 6 months from now might have to come back to this code and it's going to be confusing, possibly, or like I might have to understand it and you won't remember what you wrote. I don't remember what I wrote a week ago sometimes, or yesterday, right? Like, so write code that's kind to your future self. If that requires comments, write comments, right? Like, another thing is to also be kind to your teammates, right? Code that you think other people could read pretty well. Don't be tricky. Don't be super clever, right? Like, it's okay to be a little verbose, assuming you have no performance bottlenecks, and be understood by your team, right? But that's the best I can. Tim Oxley, a man who knows a lot more about JavaScript than I do, writes in the on the note of being kind to yourself and teammates. Note that those catches will also handle any errors that occur in your success reducer, and then stored as if it were a remote request failure, which could make it confusing to debug. Fair enough. Okay, so I think I'm trying to understand what he's saying, and I've told all of you before, like, I don't shy away from when I don't know things and don't understand. And I'm sure Tim can send me a message on Twitter and really explain this better to me one of these days. But if what I'm getting wrong here is... okay, so you're saying I think I get Tim. If this action were also to produce an error, what it would do is it would get caught here. So I'm not only catching, in this case, an error on the response, but because this function is inside of this, it is saying, like, if somehow this action creator were to throw an error, because it's inside the try, it would also throw an error here. So let's fix that really quick. So the main point was we want to await and we want to do this, and if there's an error, do that. So this could be challenging to be a debug. That's interesting. So I suppose what I could do is I could do something like this, I think, and I'll let Tim tell me if I'm wrong. So I can define a response outside of the scope. And then down here, I could do, it feels a bit contrived, but if by now I have a response, dispatch this. I don't know that this is maybe the correct way, and this is also why you get mentors in your life, and you don't be ashamed of not knowing shit. You ask people. It's how you learn. You also try things. Didn't I say that the other day? Just try stuff. So I think this might be a good way to handle this. I could be wrong. Yeah, the alternative is less pretty. So yeah. And then I guess we can do this in here too. We'll get our response. And what we'll do is if we have a response, we can assign the repos and we can dispatch them. So we can do something like that. I think this is a refactor that would work. Yeah, cool. So, and then another thing I like to do in terms of clean code and being kind to yourself and your teammates is if you don't know JavaScript super well, there's this thing called hoisting. So I'm going to give you a really basic JavaScript 101 for you. And this can be the host of a lot of bugs. Once you learn it, it's not so bad. But okay. If I declare a variable, we'll use let because I can't redeclare a const. But if I declare a variable in one line, so let foo equal bar, there's actually two things that happen. The way the engine reads this is it just splits it into two things. The declaration of the variable name, let foo, and the assignment. Okay? So what happens with these declarations is they get hoisted. They get hoisted to the top of the functions block. And then their assignments occur where you wrote them. And so you can end up with this zone where, like, if I console log foo here, where it might be undefined. I know there's some gotchas with lets and consts and the temporal dead zone and all that, and I don't really want to go into that per se. But what I'm saying is, like, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm moving my let declaration above the first function call I make because it will, one, kind of signal to me and my future self that, like, one, let signals to me that I'm reassigning this value possibly throughout the function. I use const otherwise, right? I know some people disagree with that, but that's some code documentation to me, right? Like, that's the code telling me I'm gonna reassign this. But also, like, by moving it to the top, I never have to worry about the hoisting confusing me or leading me to a bug. So that's a little tip for you. If you're doing a pattern like this where, like, you're gonna reassign a value later. So a variable later. So yeah, I think this should all work. We're gonna come back to our website. It looks like it worked. It didn't yell at me. Yeah, look at that. It's great. It's good. So this might be a little more readable to you. It's a little more, there's a few more things you kind of have to write and try with Async, but, like, imagine if you had a lot of things, like tests. Like, if I could get my laptop, my work laptop up for you, you could see some of our end-to-end tests or acceptance tests, as they're called in Ember. And they just have, like, await, what? Like, just so many awaits. Looking back at the chat, Tazbar asked why I put the async before dispatch rather than the top level function. Because the top level function itself is not asynchronous. Like, the asynchronicity happens to the returned function, to the thunk itself. And so I don't think I'd quite get the behavior I want, or maybe I would. This could be just something we try. But I know that this function itself is the asynchronous one. This is the one that's going to be called later. This is the one that has the asynchronous parts inside of it. This is really just this is actually a synchronous pure function, right? Like, if I give it this username, it's always going to give me back the same function. Like, and that's a distinction that's maybe a bit trivial, but it is useful, and I think probably why Redux follows this kind of thunk pattern to make this stuff happen. So yeah, Yeah, okay. So I got a little lost there. I'm sorry. You know me. Like I said, I do a lot of talking. Um, so we've kind of done this refactor here. And a part of me wants to start making this a bit more, I don't know, stylish, a bit more interesting. Um, I could do a couple things. Let me ask you this. I'm gonna ask you in the chat. We can try exploring styling this, and I can walk you through the different ways that I approach styling React apps. I don't think I have anything super novel, but I could probably walk you through like everything from as basic to Sass, which I have set up in here already. To we could do some inline styles, and then we could switch it to using some basic styled components. I'd have to install it, but we could start doing that. I've just started to get really into the whole CSS and JS, and it doesn't hurt that I've kind of made friends with some of the people that make the libraries, and they're all good guys and good gals, and it's just great to see what they're doing. And I think React having the ability to do CSS and JS is man, it's such a win, especially on big teams where you're trying to like ensure the encapsulation of your styles for that component. So we can go that route. We can style this up and we can make it a bit bigger, a bit prettier. Or the other option I mentioned earlier is that I could start covering higher order components. Because we should cover those at some point, and they're very useful in React as well. So I'm gonna sip my beer here for like a couple seconds. I actually, this is how much I came prepared. I have my second one waiting here. But let me know in the chat, what do you want? Do you want to cover styled components and CSS? Or do we want to try higher order components and some functional programming stuff? I think this might be the most awkward silence I've had. Tazbar is asking for CSS grids. Cool. I haven't done enough with CSS grids to do it this week, but I'm happy to do it some week. Styled components, functional. I'm getting both. Iceman, nice name. So when I was in high school, believe it or not, when I had hair and I didn't have a beard, I looked pretty much exactly like Val Kilmer, and I got called Iceman quite a lot. Styles, please, from Jax. If Jax is who I think she is, I'm amazed that all you people in the UK are still awake. Isn't it like you guys are 8 hours ahead of me, aren't you? Good golly, when do you sleep? CSS. All right, let's just do it this time. Let's do some CSS, and I'm gonna step you through like a couple processes that I do. All right, cool. I do want to fix one little thing I noticed. This URL is not correct. It is actually getting me the API. I want to check what data I get real quick because it's driving me nuts. Oh, it's such a bummer. Oh, it happens like this sometimes. I don't even know why. It just decides like, hey, I don't want to render the full screen. I only want to render a quarter of it because, like, yeah, I'm cool like that. All right, we're gonna try something else. Can I get to the React tab? It's not even sending me the React tab. Ah, son of a biscuit. All right, well, hey, this is something kind of interesting. I can possibly do. What do I want to try and do? I'm gonna try and do something. I just want to get at my data somehow. So what I'm gonna do is in my GitHub profile, you can actually do this. If you want a quick little debugger, you can do a pre and a code, and we'll close this out. and I hope I get this right the first time. If not, no big deal. I'll figure it out. But you can do a JSON parse data null 4, I think would be the tab. Like, we can give it some good space. And I hope this is right. No, it wasn't right. It wasn't right. Expected token O and JSON at point position 1. Stringify, maybe. No, that would be making a string. It's gotta be parse. I did something. Oh, there we go. It is stringify. Sweet. I got something wrong. So this is the URL. This is the one I want. That's the one I want off of that. I want to send y'all to my repo. So hey, how's that for a nice little tidbit there? You can do anytime you want to like throw something into your app and just see the data dump that you're getting. Like, this is really useful. If you know you're already getting an object of data, if you want to reduce the tabbing, like, you can do that. It'll reduce the indentation. But yeah, you can console it out, and then you can get a good chance to look at it. So this is the one I want, HTML URL. We're going to make some updates here. We'll call it HTML URL. It might yell at me for having... HTML URL. It might yell at me for having... trying to see if there's anywhere else I need it. Probably in the reducer. No, it's just on the... See if that changed it. And then we can comment this out. I messed something up. Expected, exception, states, tab, comment, blah, blah, blah. I will just rip it out. Rip it out. Take it out. Throw it out like the trash. Did this go to the right one? Yeah, it's the right link. All right. All right. Come on. What is sleep? Well, I mean, I don't know. Last few years, I'm a night owl. I like staying up. I stay up to about midnight every night. But anymore, man, like, I get tired a little bit earlier. I'm waking up early. Shoot, man. I wake up before my alarm clock like every single day right now. Part of it is that I have 2 cats that, like, I thought maybe one of them was in here, that demand food like really early. But the other part of it is I'm just getting old. Like, man, if I'm already waking up like an old man at 32, I cannot imagine how early I'll be getting up when I'm like 52 or 62. Heaven forbid if I make it. Like, I hope I do. I hope all you live long and fruitful lives. That kind of thing. But, man. All right. Let's do some styling. Let's make this cool. All right. So... all right. So the first way that we can write styles is like we could write plain CSS. That's always an option to you. That that will never go away. And CSS is getting better all the time. We now have variables in CSS. Like, you can use them in most browsers. That's great. They have their own caveats and their own syntax and stuff, but it's good to know. And then if you were like me and you've been coding for a few years, you know all about writing Sass probably, or maybe less, or maybe even stylus. We have these preprocessors, and we can set these up with our Webpack config to be run. In fact, let me show you what that kind of looks like. If you're just like transforming an app, say maybe a legacy app that has a CSS file already, and you want it to add to your React app, and you've just kind of redone a bunch of stuff in React, but maybe given it the same class names, all you need to do is you're going to import your Sass file here, and then the other thing that you do for that is in your Webpack setup, you'll need a loader that's set up to handle. In this case, this one handles my SCSS files. This one would handle any CSS files that I have, say like a third party or something like that I need to somehow import in. And so you can use this same methodology. Let's start there. There's nothing inherently wrong about it. It's just not the new hotness. You can make good quality CSS just using plain CSS or Sass or something like that. It takes discipline, it takes some knowledge, but it can be done. And lots of web apps have been doing it for years, right? Like that was the first 3 years. Oh, there she is. There's Tally. She doesn't want to come up. She just wants some food. Sorry. If I haven't referenced before, my cats are named after Mass Effect characters. So if y'all like Mass Effect, actually today is N7 day. And who's your favorite stream in the Citadel? I hope someone gets that reference. That would be amazing. Um, my name is Shepard, and I approve this Twitch stream. Um, anyways, so we can use Sass, right? And actually, for a lot of my personal apps, I still use Sass because it's fast for me, and it's simple. And I'm not building something so incredibly complex that like I really need to isolate my styles or make something more reusable throughout my app. And so I have my means of doing that, and we could do something pretty quick here, I guess. Typically, I like to have like a globals folder. That didn't add. There it is. And in my globals folder, you know what? We're gonna do this from the command line because we're not savages. Okay, so we're gonna get into globals and we're gonna touch a variables.scs, functions.scs, and mixins.scss. So you might be familiar with files like this. Other global files I might have would be things like typography and fonts and tags. Tags is a pretty common one that I have. I use tags for HTML elements, right? Like, so this is a way you can do it. And then you'd write your styles, and you'd pass them. You'd import them in here. Like this could be a layout file, that kind of thing. You do that, and then it gets compiled. Everyone kind of knows that one. That's not why you're here. That's not the new hotness. That's not the jam. That's not what you want to be doing. So. But I just want to point it out. It's a perfectly legitimate way to make a React app, especially a small one. Like, web developers, we're really great at deciding that, we need to do the latest and greatest thing. And to me, it's not so much about doing the latest and greatest thing, so much as is doing something that I'm still comfortable and free with, right? One of the reasons I love React is the sheer flexibility that the API gives you. It feels freeing. It doesn't ever feel constraining. Like it for the most part, my imagination has not been stretched. I've not yet found the limits. Like if I can imagine it, a lot of times I can find a way to do it. Whereas other frameworks that shall go unnamed, like I feel really constrained, and I feel like I have to have so much domain knowledge before I can even accomplish things. So my point being, those can be really challenging. I'm going to disable this. I'm going to keep the app SCSS style there. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in normalize and get some styles from it. And I suppose I could do reset too. I sometimes put them both together, but we don't actually need this. I was just showing you. But we'll throw it, we'll put it in a separate file. New folder, we'll call it setup, because it's really setups, I guess. New file, normalize, we'll paste that in there, save it, in our app CSS, we're going to import normalize first. And I actually do this, if you didn't know. You can like do this with Sass. I actually find it to be really clean. Like, not saying you repeat them, but like if you have other ones, like if this was like reset and this was foo, you can put these on separate lines. You don't have to write import for each one of them. Just saying, it's an option for you. Anyways, I'm going to import normalize, and then I shouldn't need this anymore, and we'll just get rid of all of that. And that should give us something that changed. And we'll refresh. Okay. And I'm going to add, just because I don't want to deal with it, but we will add a globals and a tags. I should have just kept it, but what I'm just going to set up some sans body font. Sans serif. And I'm just doing this this way because I've done it forever. But let's pull in our tags, and then this should change the fonts. Okay, that is the start. I will start with. Now let's add styled components. Hey, I failed a test somewhere. What did I do? I'll fix that later. I'm not even going to look at it right now. Okay. Let's back up. Let's get all the way up to, my app. All right. Yarn adds styled components. Okay. So styled components is made by was created by Max Stoiber. Really great guy. He gave a good talk at React Rally about contributing to open source, and I really suggest you go check it out. But what styled components is it takes advantage of two things. It takes advantage of a higher order component like structure, in that it takes something and returns us a component in its function, and it makes use heavily of the tagged template literal. So this is kind of a JavaScript basic, but if we come back to, say, our app full, so a template literal is something we got with ES 2015 or ES 6, whatever you want to call it, and it uses these backticks, right? Like, let me increase in size. These backticks to create strings. This is a string. And what it gives us is the option to do interpolation, which we didn't have before. If I have a variable like const foo equals bar, before template literals, this is a template literal with interpolation. Before that, we would have to do things like this. This is a string plus foo. Okay? That was how we did string concatenation. You could still do it that way. But template literals gave us a really nice feature. What some people don't realize is that there's this thing called a tag template literal, which is literally, it's a function that takes a template literal as its argument. So if I scroll down, where is it? Tag template literals. It's more advanced, but what it is you create a function that takes some things, and it'll give you an output. And for instance, like my tag takes this template literal as its argument, and it creates some output. In this case, we're just supplying person and age. Any argument you give to it can be added as part of the function, right? So I don't actually understand why they had to do this interesting syntax, but that's what it is. It's function name followed by the template literal you're passing into it. And that's how we're going to actually write our styles. We are going to get a tag template literal function from styled components. We're going to give it a template literal of our styles, and what it's going to give back to us is a new component with those styles in it. And that's what makes this so powerful. I said at the beginning of the stream, maybe even before some of you were on, that I had a pretty good week in some regards. And one of the ways was in Twitter, and I might not even Bem. I wonder if I'm Googleable. Is safety by discipline? See if this will come up. Look at that. I'm Googleable. That's funny. So I wrote this tweet earlier this week, and honest to God, it's my most popular tweet I've ever had. But BEM is a block element modifier. It's a syntax and a strategy for writing CSS and Sass and less and all that. BEM is safety through discipline. CSS and JS is safety through API design, which is what I'm about to show you, right? Like, the former works but can be easily broken, the latter will always work. Because these are functions and they're going to give you new components with new styles, right? Like, we can guarantee that no other component in the application has the same class. So there's no risk of collision or cascading issues. Hi, Tally. I don't know if they can see you. There's no risk of those things, which makes CSS and JS such an appealing thing. You won't break your styles from some strange conflict. You won't need to write exclamation point importance all over the places to get your styles working. So let's actually do this. I've talked enough. We're going to import styled components like this. We're going to get styled, which is the default export from styled components. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this component and I'm going to make it a styled one. So it's very similar to writing stateless functional components. So I'm going to write wrap equals styled. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the tag that we were using. So styled.div in this case. And then from here, we're going to give it a template literal of our styles. So I'm going to close that out. The wrap, if we look at our elements, is currently here. Okay? What I want to do is I'm going to make this responsive, and I'm going to center it. So we'll set the width to say 75%, and we'll give it a margin left of auto, and a margin right of auto. And those will be our basic styles. And what we do now is, because styled components gives us back a component, we replace our component with that styled one. You see what I did there? I've made a new component with the styled components API, and when we come here, we can see that if you look at it very nicely, it has our 75% width, and you might see here that it has these interesting class names. And what's that doing? What that is doing is it's actually injecting style sheets into the head of our document. And you can see our styles right there. So this gives us a way of encapsulating styles to our component. We can, if we had certain things that we wanted to have available all throughout the app, maybe instead of wrap, we could call it like container. That wouldn't be a bad thing, like dot containers you might have seen that hold our grid. But we could export these or make them in a separate file. You might have something like a new folder that was like styled components, right? You might do something like that so that you can start sharing these things around. I'm going to give it a little padding on the top and bottom. And like okay, here's something we can do. I won't bring in my whole library. I have a CSS and JS add-on or plugin, you could call it. I mean, I could get it, but that's not really the point I want to make. So I'm just going to show it to you. I'm not actually going to use it tonight because there's not really a reason, but I do have a library that's configurable vertical rhythm and typography in CSS and JS. It's called Chevy.js. Check it out. If you like it, give it a star. Like I said, I'm selfish, all that good jazz. But one feature that Chevy.js has is this base spacing function that once it's calculated the base space, we can use it over and over again. And I'm going to quickly make a utils directory, and I'm just going to export a function that I can use for the same purpose. So export function, we'll call it BS for base spacing, and it'll take a factor which will default to 1. And what I'm going to want it to do is I'm going to want it to return I'm going to want it to return a string that is the value times the factor. So I'm going to have like a base spacing value. So const base spacing equals, in this case, we'll make it 15, as in like 15 pixels. And what I'm going to have BS do for me is I'm going to have it multiply return. We'll have base spacing times the factor in pixels. In fact, export default. Can I do that? I might want to do it this way then if I'm going to do that. Const BS equals, and we can shorten this up to just that. And for right now, since it's the only one, that should work. And then in here, I'm just going to import BS from utils. And then what you can do in this, because it's a tag template literal, is I can do padding top is BS2. And I'll do the same for the padding bottom. If you're wondering why I'm explicitly writing these out instead of using the shorthand, it's because shorthands are a foot gun. Not so much a problem when you're using CSS and JS, but if you've written as much CSS as I have, shorthands can come and bite you in the ass later, because they can override specificities down the cascade that you weren't expecting. Mr. Ren Recton says, so you could do const container styled import container.css. I've never tried it. Why don't you give it a try and report back? I've not tried something like that. Assuming your whole CSS was a string, yes, because it needs to be a template literal, remember. Or you need to make the insides a string. I'm not sure what the import of a CSS file would be. I don't know if it would give you an actual full string, or I would just give it a try. Give it a try, Mr. Ren Recton. I hope I'm getting that right. And so this is like a way we can interpolate values into our CSS. And so we should see a little padding up here on the top. And we do. And look, it even came out what we expected. It's 30 pixels. All right, let's go a little further with this, right? Let's go to our, what's a good one? Our GitHub profile. Okay, so you may have seen here that I have all these class names, and you can pass class names to styled components as just the class name prop like you would any other JSX, but we won't really need these is kind of the point. You might have a situation where you do want to hook into a global style or something. If that is your case, I want to encourage you to make sure that's what you need. Like that you're mixing these two things together, that is the simplest solution to what you are trying to solve. Excuse me. Wow. I'm yawning it up. I'm yawning it up as he downs his beer and puts more depressant into his bloodstream, right? Actually, beer is just so stinking tasty. I need to have more of it. Okay. What I'm saying is if you have a situation where you need to have both CSS and JS and a class name that you're pulling from a global style, there might be an easier solution. I just want to point that out first. But you could totally do it. So let's refactor this one kind of quick. We're going to pull it in again. Import styled from styled components. Okay. And I jumped all the way to the bottom. That was silly. Let's make the profile name bigger. So we'll make let's start with the name, styled, and everything in here is a div. This might get a little boring. There are there's spans, there's H1. In fact, we can do an H1 here. Let's do an H1. Let's make it an H1. Hi, Tali. Hi, I appreciate you. I like you. And I know you're hungry, but I fed you before the stream. I sure did. Okay. Sorry. I hope you can appreciate a cat parent just doing his good cat parenting duties. We'll make the name an H1, and we'll say font size of 20 pixels. And we'll do margin bottom. Let's import my BS again. I'll have to come up here and do that. Import my BS. It's so much fun. Okay, so and then we will replace this div with name. It's no longer a div. It's an H1, and then we don't need the class name. And we might see. There we go. Okay, let's take the login, which is this, and I don't know. We can do something with it, can't we? Let's at least give it a margin bottom. We'll make it a little smaller, but const login equals styled. And this is really kind of the gist of what it is. We'll do font size like 14 pixels. Let's, font style, italic. I'm just making crap up here. Margin, bottom. We'll only give it half my BS. It doesn't get old. In fact, that was one of my favorite things about aliasing the function. Radari, I will get to your question here in just a second. I just want to let you know I will. And so we replace that with login. And then the bio. Maybe we only want it to cover like half the width. Let's save it. Const bio equals style.div. And we'll do like a width of 50%. And another margin bottom. And there are ways that you can actually like optimize this. I know I'm not doing the best job of it here. But I'm just trying to give you guys and gals a gist of like how this can work. So yeah, there we go. It's starting to look a bit like a profile a little bit, right? Okay. I'm going to take a second to catch up on what Radari is saying in the chat. He is describing, he asked, do you have any thoughts on coding boot camps? They are becoming especially popular in major cities and tech areas. Okay. Yeah, I have some thoughts. And I'm just going to also quickly answer binary sloth tree. I do work at Fastly, hence the swag. Okay. As for boot camps, what are my thoughts on them? So, if you caught the stream earlier, I kind of shared a bit about my story and how I'm coming up on like my 4-year anniversary of being a professional web developer and software engineer. And I did not grow up doing coding. I didn't start learning to code till I was, I think, 27. And I taught myself while I was in grad school, and I learned enough to get a job, and yada yada yada. So I am a big advocate for telling people it's possible to teach yourself and learn enough to get a job, because it is possible, but the timeline might be a lot longer if you're going to do it yourself. I spent about a year or a year and a half working on coding just about every day. And there came a point near the last 6 to 8 months before I got my first job where I was pretty jobless. I had some small jobs. I was living in LA for most of that time. I was doing like tutoring and teaching and that kind of thing, and it wasn't paying anything much. But every morning I would get up, I would make a pot of coffee, and I would code for like 3 to 4 hours. I would just find random blogs and tutorials, and I'd just do it. Even when I was confused, I just tried. I just kept trying, and eventually I learned enough to get my first job. And when I got my first job, I want to be clear, I didn't know shit. Like, I thought I knew some stuff because I had learned some cool things, and I knew more than the person who knew nothing. But all I really knew when I started my job was I knew HTML. I knew CSS pretty well, reasonably. I knew some jQuery, and I just started writing Sass. Like, I'd barely started in it, my own project writing it. And I got hired at an agency, and they paid me bottom of the barrel. I didn't know it. I was super excited. I'd been a pastor. I'd been paid at the poverty line my whole life. So they paid me just fine to me. I worked my butt off. For the first year, all I did was legacy code maintenance work. Like, I learned stuff about PHP and Ruby on Rails and lots of old jQuery, and I just did grunt work. And I got a lot better, obviously. Here's the thing. When I started 4 years ago, these boot camps were just starting to come out. And there were a few, but there's so many more now. And so when they're just starting to come out, there are people now, like, there's two things that have happened. The market's becoming saturated with people who are coming out of code schools because they're seeing a lucrative career, and they're not wrong. But when there's a saturation of people at a certain area in the market, jobs for them are obviously tight. Like, there's just not the market cannot handle that quantity of devs in that skill level. And this isn't a slight on the market or on you. I'm not insulting you, and I'm not discouraging you. What I'm trying to say is the bar has been raised for entry level. And so I think it's totally possible to teach yourself, but your timetable might be longer, and how much you have to learn compared to what I had to learn 4 years ago is different. And I just want you to keep that in mind. It's not impossible. It's totally possible. You can do it. But I want to help everyone be realistic too. As for the boot camps, because the bar is getting raised, the boot camp will help you. It'll speed you up because it'll force you to be focused. You will have people to help you. That's a big deal. Teaching yourself is very challenging when you don't have people to help you. But it does teach you how to learn, which is a skill you'll need your whole career. You need to know how to learn. That is more important than what you know now. Your ability to keep learning is probably your strongest ability. Not only as a junior, but just as someone in this career, because I didn't know this a year ago, and I know it now, right? Because I learned, and you're going to learn too. And so I don't have an answer for you so much as I have, those are the things to consider about whether or not you should go to a boot camp. A boot camp is going to help you get up to speed, but you're probably still going to have some gap between that starting job and what you learn in a coding school. Now, what I have seen from boot camp grads is a lot of them get the JavaScript pretty well because they get taught pretty well, but they learn something brand new like React, which is great, but not every project out there is greenfield. Most of the money in the world is made with brownfield projects. So it behooves you to learn some older code, some older frameworks, so that you might be able to offer more to businesses in terms of like what you can do to help them maintain their revenue. So that's something to consider too. And also, I find boot camp grads come out using things like Bootstrap and Foundation and have no clue how to actually write CSS. And unfortunately, as a front end developer, that's really something you need to learn, and you're only going to learn through time. Whoa, there's a lot of things going on in there. Sorry. My point being, you're probably going to fall short in some ways, whether you go to boot camp or not. You need to weigh the timeline versus the money and what your needs are now. I used codeacademy.com, by the way, to really get started if you're looking for a free resource. I want to catch these before they get off my screen. I don't know what the lucky was for from Sun Mercury. Baji Boy, I'm sorry you're having problems with recursion. It is a difficult thing to learn. Rectin is talking about hating Perl. I can understand that. Okay. Doesn't look like it's anything I need to know right this moment what's going on. But yes, they're a lot of money. They're challenging. They do give you some cred. You'll still have a gap probably between your knowledge and getting started. The thing that code school might give you that learning on your own might not is both a speeded up timetable as well as maybe some network connections. So networking is a really challenging thing. I actually plan on writing a bit about how I use Twitter to build up my network, but those are my ideas about code school. We've got probably like 10-15 more minutes on the stream. Get your questions in, people. And oh, look at that, Tim Oxley giving a good resource there about Node School. Binary Sloth 3 is asking me how I got my job at Fastly. I got my job by passing an interview. No, I was reached out to by a recruiter, and occasionally on LinkedIn, sometimes every once in a while, a decent opportunity will come in. I probably get a reach out about once or twice a week at this point in my career. That drastically increased when I got a little more active on Twitter, and my name started to get a little more popular, and it increased when I got a little more active in open source. And I think another part of it is like, as silly as it sounds, but if you look at my GitHub contributions, I'm pretty consistent. I think all that helps recruiters think that I'm a valuable person for their teams. I went through a long process of trying to find a job. It's always challenging. It's challenging at every level until you're just a superstar and they're just handing them to you. I am not a superstar. I'm a good dev. I'm not a 10 times developer like you may have heard. I'm a good dev, and what I probably can do best other than write decent code is I feel like I'm a reasonably good teacher. So I feel like I can add value to teams by helping people get up to speed and learn more. And so that's kind of what I try and offer and bring to the teams I work on. As well as I feel like I'm really good at the big picture or architectural level things, really understanding that kind of stuff. I'm really good at nailing like organization. As I progress my career, like in the next year or two, I'd really like to get more into like building tools and libraries. And I'm hoping I can learn how to transfer some of those into APIs and API design. And so that's where I would like to grow as a developer. Anyways, that's how I got the job at Fastly. A recruiter reached out to me. I went through their extensive process and I passed their tests. To give you some clues, I was also I interviewed with Facebook and Netflix and Amazon and Stripe and some other big companies too. And I got to final interviews like everywhere but Facebook, and I failed them all. So it happens to the best of us. It's a tough world out there. So my main point I'd like to make is just be patient with yourself and stick with it. You may not get there today, you may not get there tomorrow, but you are capable of learning what it takes, and sometimes it just takes a little more time. That's it. So keep trying. Get your questions in if you have any. Let's like add a few more styles here. So maybe we get to our repos and we'll style up this button real quick. We'll import styled from styled components again. And this time, where is it? We got a button here. We'll just do the classic const button equals styled dot button. And maybe we do some, we'll make the background color teal. It's one of my favorite named colors. We'll make the color white. We'll give it some padding of like 5 pixels and 15 pixels, and I'm just picking random numbers. I think we'll give it a border of none, an outline of, yeah. I know I got a few of you accessibility people watching me. I won't change the outline. We'll give it some border radius. And I think we might, I don't know, display, I don't know if this one's necessary, but I'm going to, and then so the way I like to write CSS is I like to work from the box model out. So like I have my padding, my border, and then my margin. And we'll just, we'll keep importing my BS so that it's consistent. The reason this is interesting to me, like this function, is I'll show you in a second. Let me replace the button. Okay. And let's see how that looks. What did I screw up? There we go. Oh, I need to cursor pointer that. That's always a nice touch. I see some questions. I'm gonna try and get to it in a second. What the reason this BS function is interesting to me is if you make a change to this, it can update that spacing throughout your application. So if I go with 10, you'll see everything tighten up as it reloads. See? And or if I go with something large like 24 maybe, you'll see it get bigger. And it's kind of a nice little useful util for doing that sort of thing. I need to check my okay. I'm sorry. I'm actually on call at my company. I need to check this Slack really quick. And it's my week to be on call. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, this is boring. It's just, they pay me lots of money to do this. Okay. I am not a DevOps engineer. I'm a front end developer, but they put us on call. It makes me sad. I'm on call from Christmas to New Year's Eve this year too. I'm really sad. Someone asked earlier if I stream often. I stream once a week, so please come check me out. It's either a Tuesday or Wednesday every week. I tweet about it. Um, yeah, so I lost track a little bit. Thank you for bearing with me for dealing with that. So style components, as you can see, it's a pretty simple thing. I think there are some add-ons that allow you to do styled components like SAS, it looks like, if you want to do that. So there's all these tips and tricks. I'm just starting to get into it myself. So, you know, I'm learning, you're learning. It looks like at any time you can pass props to determine things. Like this is really helpful, like if you need to determine things based on size, or like a button might be big or small, and you can see it right there. You can do all sorts of things with it, and that's really cool. Like, and looks like you can do some SAS stuff as well. I encourage you to check it out and learn more about it. We can definitely spend a little more time covering CSS and JS in the future. Yeah, but that's kind of the gist. Most of them operate this way. The other ones I might recommend to you are Glamorous. I'll pull that one up. That might not actually pull up what I'm expecting. Yeah, it will. There we go. Good Google knowing. And then my buddy Kai from Colorado, he does Emotion, which is a super performant one. Like that's the thing about this one. Like that's what they're going for, hyper performance. And it's got a very similar API to styled, but gives you a couple other things. So and it just changes it a little bit. It uses I'm not sure how this is working under the hood, but rather than a method on styled, it's I think it's a getter or some kind of thing like that, maybe. That's my guess. But yeah, it like just looks like most of the questions tonight are about a lot more about boot camps. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about those. I mean, like boot camps, they can be worth your money. I haven't gone to one personally, so I can't speak to that. You know, it's really something you have to consider. It is like a college, you know, it's like it's an expensive education. It's very short. So, Jen Luker, Nick Code Monkey is sharing a really great resource. Let's see if I can't copy paste that into here so everyone can take a look real quick. This is the guy who quoted my tweet at the conference. He built this playground to let you try out the different, look at all of these. There's so many of them. Here, it'll change the API for you. Look at that. It's pretty sweet. Or we can check out Glamorous. Glamorous uses the JavaScript object notation, which is kind of nice because you can actually do things like merging objects together. Like, you know, maybe you have like half your styles in this object and the other half in this object, and then you could do, you know, you could do something like const foo equals glamorous dot div, and then you could do, and because it's just JavaScript, right? You could totally get away with this. Half styles. I can't type other half styles. Like you can make components that way. So it's totally an option to you. It's kind of up to you to give a tryout of all of them and find out what works for you. And as I said before, make sure it's a good solution to your problem. You know, no reason to get ahead of yourself if not necessary. But, you know, this is really fun, and it's really nice to kind of have that security of it, like of knowing that like you're not going to have these collisions, and for the most part they're going to be performant, and you're only going to get what you ask for. Because here's the thing, like in something like React, like you'll never get styles you don't need. When you write a normal style sheet, you have to provide styles for every possible scenario in your application, and that can be really tedious and challenging. So uh, Tazbar, why don't you send me a tweet that with a little, like a direct message? My direct messages are open, people. You can send me messages whenever you need to. Send me a tweet with a couple more of the things that you need to talk about, so I can get a little more context of what you're saying right there. Tazbar is writing something in the chat for those of you who might watch this later or on YouTube or something and see that. He's asking about like, can we touch base? And I'm just trying to tell you, like, you can totally, you guys can, any one of you guys and gals, you can reach out to me. You're my friends. You can reach out to me and ask me questions. Impact Zuar, I think if I'm pronouncing that right, says he misses CSS autocomplete. Some of them have it. What I miss is actually highlighting. You at least kind of get it with the object notation, but with a string, it's all colored the same. That's what I miss. I miss the syntax highlighting. And I haven't figured that one out. In fact, I think that's kind of the one downside of all these things with template literals these days, whether it be styles or other things that you might be using it for, is the loss of... for example, there's an option in Ember to write inline templates using a tag template literal, and I miss having syntax highlighting on those templates. So... it's an option. So, all right, folks. I think I'm gonna wrap it up tonight. I gotta feed the cats. I think my wife's on her way home. I'm getting text that the D&D group is done. So I want to say, as I say every week, I thank you so much for spending your time with me, your evenings, your super late nights. You people not sleeping in the UK. Seriously. I'm both impressed and flattered. Thank you for spending time with me. The whole reason I started this stream was to feel a little less lonely as I coded. And what you're teaching me is that like we have a community together, and that we can have interactions, and they can be meaningful and helpful, and we can make our little world a slightly better place. So I thank you for that. I know that's preachy, but this is more than you asked for, right? So I'm always going to give you more than you asked for. Once again, I've had a fantastic time. I'm sorry it was a little all over the place, but you know, that's how it is. I'm just having fun, and I hope you're having fun too. So thank you for sticking around. Feel free to send me your ideas. Some people sent me some ideas of maybe refactoring their code. So we can do that one of these weeks. I think next week I might get into React Router a bit for you guys. I do want to really cover higher order components, and then function as children components soon. Those are really important patterns in React. And so I would love to teach you all that too. And if you have something interesting, feel free to send me a message about it or a tweet, and we'll find a way to, you know, do this together. Because, you know, we might run out of React someday. I doubt it, but we might. And we'll move on to something else, or we'll just talk about JavaScript fundamentals, or maybe we'll talk about getting better at these interviews that y'all are getting nervous about, and that kind of thing. So, I'm here to help you guys and gals, and I'm sorry. I'm really struggling with that one. I'm here to help you friends, and thank you so much. So have a good night. I gotta feed the cats. I gotta finish my beer. Cheers wherever you are, and peace out. We'll see you next week.